It's important to track your progress, but when it comes to these guys, not all weigh-ins are created equal. So today I'm going to go through 3 different methods of tracking your weight, which each have their own pros and cons to help you guys decipher the confusing world of why you jump on the scales when you followed your plan absolutely to a T, but you don't see the result you wanted to see. Let's get into it. Now, method number 1, I'm sure we're all familiar with. This is the most common style of weighing yourself. So, you pick a day of the week, let's say a Monday, this is me, and we're 174.6 pounds on Monday. We track and we focus and we adhere to a program for 7 days completely, and in 7 days time we weigh ourselves again. And you can see a drop of 2.6 pounds. And then of course we repeat the cycle for the next 7 days. But in between, we don't step on the scales. We just focus on taking a particular weight on one day of the week and comparing it against the same day the next week. Now, there's a lot of pros to this in the sense of you're not obsessed with the scales and because you're not using them very often. It's once a week, maybe even once a fortnight, and therefore there's nothing you kind of have to worry about with getting obsessed with the number in that sense. But it also shows somewhat linear progress because, as you can see, that you're giving your body time to adjust. However, there are a couple of cons. The first being, this style of weighing in is very heavily influenced by water retention. So, for example, that was 172. Let's say on the Saturday night you go out for a meal and you've saved the calories for it, you're not into a surplus, you've budgeted for it with your weekly calories. What will then happen, whether that's the Saturday or the Sunday, is if you weigh in on Monday, you're going to be heavier because you've consumed more salt, you've consumed more carbohydrates, you may even be dehydrated, which again will then lead to water retention. So therefore, what tends to then happen is it affects your weigh-in. Now that doesn't mean you haven't made progress since the Monday previous, but it means that something you did around this time has influenced that number. Time of the month is a big one here too. Ladies, let's say you're all fine here, but then the week before your cycle is here. The week before a woman's menstrual cycle, they tend to hold a lot more water, and therefore this weigh-in may go up. It may have been dropping over the course of the week, but the problem with this weigh-in is you've got that water retention because your period has begun, and therefore that number is heavily affected. The other problem, and the final problem I've got with this particular style of weighing is it's very day specific. So kind of evolving on the point I just mentioned, you may find that because of weekly routines, weekly habits, you are a specific weight on a specific day. You may hold more weight over the weekend because of the foods you consume, but then have less weight on a Monday. For example, scientists did a test and found that the most optimal day to do this style of weigh-in is a Friday morning, because most of us, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, are pretty consistent with what we do, and therefore Friday gave us the most unaffected weigh-in. But like I said, water retention, so many things can affect this style of weigh-in, despite the fact it's the most popular. Okay, so here we have method number 2, and this one's all about taking averages. So essentially what you do is you weigh yourself every single day. Ideally, same time of day, on an empty stomach, and after you've been to the toilet. So as you can see, we end up with a different weight every day, and you'll see there are fluctuations in this. This is due to so many things that I've touched on in previous videos, water retention, things like that, but that's for another time. Right now, your weight naturally fluctuates on a day-to-day basis, as you can see. So what you do is you still pick a particular day of the week, but instead of taking that day's weigh-in, you take the average on that day. So for example, you weigh in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Once you've done Sunday's weigh-in, you then take the average of that week. So you've got 7 days worth of data, you add it all up, divide that by 7, and that gives you 173.7 pounds. And then you crack on. You do the same for the next week, weighing yourself every single day. Then you take your average for the following week, divide by 7, and you get 172.2 pounds, which as you can see is a drop of 1.5 pounds. Now, the thing about this is you will notice you get days like this Tuesday where you jump up 2.4 pounds. Now that doesn't mean that you've gained 2.4 pounds of body fat overnight, and purely means that your body has retained 2.4 pounds of mass. That could be shit, piss, water, doesn't matter. So, the pros and cons. Pros is it's a daily reminder. I find people that use this method, they get up in the morning and by weighing themselves, particularly on days where they see this, it can motivate them. It can remind them of what their goal is, and it helps just give a little boost at the beginning of the day. Also, it's less affected by water retention. I mean, if you get sort of a weigh-in like here where it jumped up by 2.4 pounds, potentially and most likely due to water retention, then it is negated because of the fact you're taking into account the rest of the week. You know, if my weigh-in was a Tuesday, for example, and I compared Tuesday at 174.6 with Tuesday at 173.4, yes, it's a drop, but it certainly isn't a 1.5 pound drop. Okay, so you've got to recognise that your weight will fluctuate day to day, and it's more important with this method to look at the average. But there are some cons. Firstly, there is a high risk of scale obsession because you are weighing in every single day. And if you ask any nutritional psychologist or food psychologist, then they will say to you that that's potentially not a good idea. But in this instance, as long as your mindset is in check and your mindset is in the right place and you recognise that your weight will fluctuate from day to day, even as much as 2.4 pound for example, then this is a safe method to use and potentially more accurate than using method number one. The other con is it does mean you've got to weigh yourself every single day. So if you're staying away, if you're a person that kind of travels a lot, this may not be optimal for you. Of course, if you miss a weigh-in, for example, that Saturday you don't weigh in, then you divide by 6 and then that will give you a different average. But the problem is if one week you're dividing by 6, next week you're dividing by 7, you're chucking another variable into the mix and you just don't want to do that. So this can work for some people, but let me show you a third and final method that may work for you. And finally, we move on to method number 3, the new low approach. Now, with this one, you do the same as you would do with the average. So you weigh yourself every single day, and for continuity purposes, I'm using the same figures that I had as the last weigh-in, which is quite interesting when we extrapolate that data. What you do is you just track it over the course of, once again, 7 days, and you compare your lowest weight every week. So what my lowest weight on week 1 was on Wednesday, and I hit 172.1 pounds. And then on the following Monday, my new low weight was 171 pounds. Incidentally, I also hit that weight at the end of the week as well on the Sunday. Now, how we're going to look at this is obviously that is drop of 1.1 pounds, which is quite interesting given the fact that using the average method, there was a drop of 1.5. Now, that's not to say that one method is better than the other, and some of you are probably sat at home thinking, well, hang on a second, how can you lose 1.5 pounds and lose 1.1? Surely you lose weight, you lose weight. But it's down to using different methods. And this is how biased you could be, or how biased the data could be, depending on water retention. For example, I would, with the average method previously, have lost more had I not have had this jump here. So if I hadn't had that water retention, yes, my weight would have probably had a lower average. But the whole idea of the average is it negates the water retention because it balances out in the end. Or as the old saying goes, it all comes out in the wash in the end. So the pros of the new low method. It's accurate over time. You know, what we're looking for is we're looking for a drop. Weight loss is never linear. An actual weight loss kind of goal tends to go a little bit like this. But what you can see is that as long as there is a line heading down, there is that underlying progress of reducing your weight over time, then that's what matters. And let's not beat around the bush, all 3 methods are going to show you that as long as you're sticking to your program. So with this one as well, it can negate water retention to a degree. For example, if you have a particularly high sodium week, or your diet is all over the place, let's say you're on holiday, let's say you're away for a business meeting, whatever, then what can end up happening is that you don't have a new low weigh-in because you're constantly fluctuating sodium levels. You know, you're constantly fluctuating what you're doing. Maybe you're not particularly regular when it comes to your number 2s, and in that case, you won't get a new low, or the new low won't be as accurate. So yes, water retention is slightly more negated with this as it is with method number 1, but it can still affect it. And the cons, there's a high risk of scale obsession. Once again, we're weighing every day, okay? If you're not in the mindset where you can deal with the fact that your weight is going to fluctuate from a day-to-day basis, sometimes it can go up by a good couple of pounds, then this probably isn't the method for you. And it requires a daily weighing. Once again, if you're away, it's not ideal because it does require stepping on the scales every single day. And for every day you don't weigh in, it means that you could potentially be missing your new low weigh-in. So for example, if I didn't weigh in on Monday, and we forget the fact that I just removed that one, then my new low weigh-in would actually be on the Friday, which would mean that I've only lost 0.1, which could seriously fuck up my mindset. So folks, which one do you choose? Well, that all depends on you. I've got people that weigh in using method number 1, I've got people that weigh in using method number 2, and people that weigh in using method number 3. There is no wrong approach. Essentially, they are all just measures to track this, to track that progression over time. And that's the key, time. Your body can't reduce its body fat overnight. It cannot reduce or get rid of fat stores overnight, the same way it can't put them on overnight. You have to be patient. Now, there's multiple methods I haven't touched on here. You know, it's a fourth method where you don't weigh yourself, or you weigh yourself once a month. But the problem when you go to very sporadic weigh-ins or very infrequent weigh-ins is people want to see progress. We all do, okay? And even if our goal is physical and it's all aesthetic, has nothing to do with natural number, which most people, including mine, don't, then the problem with that is we all want to see the number decrease. We all need to track our progress. And we use the mirror, we use our clothes, we use measurements, but we all use the scales. We can't hide from that. And therefore, when you're weighing in once a month, it's not enough to keep you focused. My mate Ballard-Moyse, for example, they weigh in every 2 weeks. And it's because I can keep them focused for 2 weeks. But if I left the weigh-ins any longer than that, then people would begin to potentially have the odd bad day here or there and go, oh, it's okay, I've still got 2 weeks until my weigh-in. What you need to recognise is there is no right or wrong method. Regardless of the fact that the results came out differently to the drops each and every week, there's no right or wrong method. It all boils down to your personal preference and what you think best fits with your mindset and your lifestyle. At the end of the day, what matters, the most important, aside from anything else, is progression over time. As long as your weight is dropping over time, it doesn't matter if you have fluctuations in that cycle. It doesn't matter if you have fluctuations per week, because you will, okay? Bit more sodium, time of the month, all these things are going to cause your weight to do that. But remember folks, it's not going to cause your fat to do that. Thank you ever so much for watching. I know this was a longer video, but I do hope you stuck around till the end and you've taken a lot away from this. Please, 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 if you feel like you know someone that can benefit from it, or even if you don't, give it a little share on your Facebooks, just so that we can expand people's knowledge with regards to tracking their progress, so that we can remove that obsession with the scales. It's a measure, guys. It's just a measure. There are multiple ways that you should be tracking your progress. Take it with a pinch of salt and recognise that your weight does not define you. See you on the next video.